The Xianzhou continent is wide and expansive, with hundreds of thousands of sects along its eastern border. In this world, a great individual may grasp the sun and moon in his palm while keeping Hongmeng in his heart. The summit of a fighter is reaching the end of the celestial route and tasting the fruity flavor of the celestial emperor. However, the way to paradise is quite arduous. If a person is not cautious, he will fall into an unending purgatory, with no bones and all of their souls dispersed. A man who was seated on a throne was upset. He yelled that it was not good for him to provoke anybody, but he wanted to provoke the Divine Sword sect. He was enraged because this person covertly drugged a female Shundao sect disciple, violated her body, murdered someone, and silenced her. He admonished him, reminding him that the most important thing for him was not to leave any evidence. The guy bowed deeply and said that he was simply preoccupied for a minute. He added that he had just returned from the Qingyan sect club and couldn't stand it for a second. The leaders rose up from his throne, outraged. He smacked the guy, who was knocked back by the hard slap. The boy had tears in his eyes and asked his father to rescue him since he did not want to die. The father frowned at his son, reminding him that there was still an opportunity for maneuvering in matters. He said that in recent years, he had sent him to the Qingyan sect for more study. He informed his son that since no one recognized him, he had already selected a scapegoat to deliver to the Shundao sect. For every horrific atrocity he has done. The boy was pleased and thanked his father. The father was still unhappy, and he told his son strongly that he should practice behind closed doors in his household, and not give him any more problems. The son fully agreed. The son went with a grim smirk on his face. The father merely snorted and sneered. At the Divine Sword Gate. A bird was passing by the Divine Sword Gate. A massive, deadly sword was thrown at the bird, and it slashed it, killing it immediately. The scapegoat was scheduled to be killed today, and everyone knows that the saint would personally punish this adultery while upholding the honor of their Divine Sword sect. The saint, who was about to kill the scapegoat, waited for him at the Divine Sword entrance gate. The scapegoat was shackled as he was brought here for execution by the holy woman. The holy woman wasted no time in using her celestial sword skills. The protagonist opened his eyes in surprise, unsure of what was going on or where he was. The holy woman exclaimed that she would correct him on the spot today. The followers were astounded that she was about to wield a holy sword on a common adventurer. The protagonist felt concerned. For just a second before calmly breaking all of these links and effortlessly blocking her sword blow with one finger. The holy woman was astounded when the main character deflected her onslaught with only one finger. After the followers were surprised, one man said angrily, "How dare you fight back?" The protagonist made a quiet greeting. He inquired, "The saint, where is this location?" The holy woman was indignant, gritting her teeth in anger. She moved with tremendous speed, attempting to assault him from all angles. The protagonist blocked every single assault she launched at him, becoming furious as he asked, but she attacked him instead. The saint couldn't think that someone as powerful as her would be able to simply beat a little adventure, but the heroine set the odds. The spectacle in front of her was terrifying to all of the disciples. They couldn't believe it. This man couldn't take it anymore, so he pulled out his sword and dashed behind the protagonist, determined to save the holy lady. The protagonist got fed up with this nonsense and yelled enough. With a quick movement, he used his hand to smack the person behind him, and he was suddenly blasted away, clutching the saint's holy sword firmly. Protagonist hit that person so hard that he made a hole in the wall, and he was knocked out quickly. Other disciples were taken aback when they witnessed this and rushed to rescue him. The protagonist was enraged and demanded to know where he was. Suddenly, his eyes sparkled, and he felt excruciating anguish. He felt his head in disbelief, unsure what was going on since he was in too much agony and became disoriented. The holy woman was perplexed when she saw this. However, she took advantage of the moment to launch a more aggressive assault. The protagonist was unable to parry the strike because he was preoccupied by the agony. The holy woman used her holy sword configuration. She and her buddies assaulted the protagonist jointly. The protagonist's attention was diverted by his suffering. He suddenly ceased experiencing agony when he opened his eyes and recalled everything. He recalled that he was once the Emperor of Heaven. Flashback. A mystery lady stood alongside him, asking whether he had actually considered it. She was thrilled that he had finally crossed the celestial path and attained the title of Celestial Emperor. She feigned to be unhappy, telling him that she had to go and cultivate, and she questioned if it was worth it. The Heavenly Emperor stated that he believed that as long as he gained the throne, he would be able to wield the most powerful sword. But, after tens of thousands of years, there is no wave in the sword heart in his body. While he was saying this, he used his overpowering strength and told her to defend him. And if there is an assault, murder everyone. And with a theatrical flourish, he threw his blade into the air. He hurled his sword, and it disappeared into the heavens. He proceeded to withdraw something from his chest, incurring significant agony in the process, but he was determined to complete the task. He then commanded the golden orb he was holding, known as the fairy. He appointed it as Emperor of Heaven for a limited time. Sienna clutched the fairy in her hand, representing the order of the Heavenly Emperor and the throne. When her eyes changed, she gave a wicked smile and let out a frightening laugh. With a tremendous blast, she penetrated the protagonist's chest, forcing him to cough blood. The protagonist experienced excruciating anguish as his chest was virtually blasted off. He was stunned that she did this. Sienna was pleased, and she instructed the main character to address her as the Emperor of Heaven. The Heavenly Emperor has just fallen down. He rose up and gazed at her, angry, for this lady had been with him for 10,000 years, and he had never found her actual face due to his ignorance. Sienna insulted him, claiming that he couldn't see her actual nature for 10,000 years. He ridiculed him again, saying that a swine like him is unworthy of running the world. She prepared to employ another method, telling him she didn't understand why he constantly seemed haughty, as he is clearly an imbecile who only knows martial arts. She questioned how someone like him could control the destiny of the planet. She then admitted to him that she had never obeyed him. She then declared that his time had come to an end. She then launched a dark crimson blast, inflicting further harm on him. She proceeded to yell that he would no longer exist on this planet, leaving just her as the strong empress. She proceeded to assault him. But she misjudged the Emperor, who immediately assaulted her with his golden energy. He discharged a great deal of force and asked her if she comprehended the sword's heart. He informed her that she lacked the qualifications for the role of Heaven's Emperor. He then used another effective tactic. The boom was so tremendous that it was witnessed all around the globe. It caused a large explosion in the earth. The explosion was so enormous that the earth fractured, causing powerful shockwaves. Sienna yelled in fury as she was defeated in a single attack. The protagonist was vanquished. However, he was relieved that Sienna was going to die. Only half of his body remained, and he saw a fissure open owing to the sword he had thrown earlier. He sighed, recognizing that this world could not sustain the strength of the sword heart at all. Even though he was about to die, he was content that the law of heaven would eternally carve his mark. It was unfortunate that Sienna couldn't kill him. She roared in hatred as she disappeared. After she dissolved, so did the Emperor, but he was protected by plot armor. So, when he reincarnated in this body, he opened his eyes, completely aware of who he was and what had occurred to him. Everyone around him who was about to attack him was blasted away by his strength, and several shouted in agony. All of the swords were controlled with a wave of his hand, which surprised everyone. They pondered what was going on. The holy woman fought to hold her sword, but it soon floated away from her, leaving her frightened and perplexed. The swords were floating in front of the protagonist, and the holy woman, calling him a bastard, inquired as to what sorcery he employed on her precious blade of the divine. Blade Sect. The heroine was furious because she felt the holy sword belonged to their divine sword cult. The emperor's aura encompassed the swords, and he corrected her on one point, informing her that all the swords in the world belonged to him, Lin Dao. Everyone simply stood there, stunned, wondering who this person was. Lin Dao was unimpressed by the saint's sword, which was only at the yellow level and belonged to the Heavenly Sword Sect. He whispered to the blade, telling it that they were destined, and that he would assist it in refining it once. The sword gleamed as he said this. He then tossed the sword into the air, and as it spun quickly, additional swords started to attract towards the center of the primary weapon, the Holy Sword. When all of the swords collided, they created a clutching sound. Lin Dao produced a frightening aura, and a monster materialized behind him, sucking all of the blades into its maw. The beast let out a loud roar, sending a shockwave through the air. People looked at this beast with horror. The saint was astounded when the holy sword was advanced. The creature let forth another terrible scream, generating an even greater shockwave that sent the saint flying. In the back of her mind, her holy sword of the Divine Sword Sect had been developed by the ancestor of the Divine Sword after hundreds of years of hard effort, and its grade was already the highest of the yellow grade. But today, the power it emanates is incredible. So the monster decided to change things up by transforming into a Chinese dragon, enabling all of the swords within to combine into a single weapon. The holy woman noticed that her holy sword's aura was so strong that it could now reach the Xian level. The dragon unleashed the merged sword, and it vanished almost quickly. The blade, floating in the air, emanated a tremendous aura. The emperor glanced at the sword, and he was disappointed since the holy weapon was too delicate for him. He leaped, grabbed the sword, and said loudly that this was the dominating weapon. His strength surged immediately when he grasped the sword, and he firmly informed the saint that the Divine Sword Sect was now his. "Have you any objections?" he asked. The saint wanted to protest, but after one glance from him, she remained mute. His one eye blazed, and she seemed to have no concerns. He unleashed the force of his new blade, and everyone stood there startled. They could not believe the holy sword had advanced. A lady far away sensed that the sword had progressed, and she wondered whether Ji Mingyu had achieved a breakthrough. At that time, she disappeared with extraordinary speed. Lin Dao was seated on his throne when the lady who had gone arrived in the royal chamber. She questioned loudly who he was. The lady recognizes that he took away the holy sword, and she is unable to see through his cultivation. She wondered whether he came from someone with a lot of influence. She exhaled and tried to settle down. She then presented herself to the emperor, stating that she was Ling Yueshuang, the Divine Sword Sect's master. She pondered why the senior had come to her Divine Sword Sect. The emperor looked at her calmly and complimented her, telling her that she had a lovely name and a great physique as he examined her body. Ling Yueshuang became enraged as he stared at her in this manner. The protagonist felt that she had a familiar atmosphere about her. He knew her last name, Ling. He wondered what the brat Ling Qianqiu had to do with her. Everyone was surprised that he knew Ling Qianqiu. Ling Yueshuang was enraged. She informed him that his cultivation was great, but he could never address her Divine Sword Sect ancestor by his first name. Lin Dao was surprised to hear her declare that the brat was now an ancestor. He was astounded to learn that thousands of years had passed, and he had no idea it would take 10,000 years to recover awareness. He closed his eyes and recalled the brat. He was astonished to see that the youngster had already become a feather. Lin Dao remained steadfast in his decision, assuring her that he would be in control of the magical sword sect starting today. He begged her nicely to step down. Ling Yueshuang was utterly irrational because she was enraged, yet her fury was very justifiable. For thousands of years, her ancestors have left the divine sword sect as a heritage. It is just impossible for her to give it off to others in this manner. She unleashed her own divine sword, proclaiming that even if the divine sword sect is destroyed, it would never be handed over to anyone else. Lin Dao smiled, understanding she had some backbone. Even though Ling Yueshuang was prepared to fight, the protagonist remained cool. He complimented Ling Qianqiu, pleased that he had a decent descendant. He told Ling Yueshuang to come closer because he had something to tell her. Ling Yueshuang was outraged, wondering what on earth he wanted to do. Lin Dao muttered something into her ear, which surprised her. The saint was perplexed as to what this person was saying. She had never seen Master's face with such an expression. She took a step back and realized. She exclaimed that Senior Lin is the new master of their divine sword sect as of today. Everyone was astonished to hear that. On the wedding day, the divine sword sect revealed that Ji Mingyu, a saint of the Xinjian sect, and Lin Dao, an abandoned disciple of the Tianjian sect, had fallen in love and married. They were getting married in 3 days. People couldn't believe the holy maiden Mingyu wanted a son-in-law. Someone crushed the paper in their hands. This person was furious because he had been after her for 3 years. But she was about to marry an abandoned disciple of the Tianjian sect. He exclaimed passionately that he and Lin Dao were at disagreement. In the back of her mind, she was upset by Lin Dao, a person who enjoys putting on airs. She questioned how Master could trust his falsehoods. She remembers her instructor telling her that this person might command the Divine Sword sect and become the most powerful figure in eastern Xinjiang. The protagonist saw how unhappy she was, so he informed her that the wedding was really a ruse, and that he is not interested in her. He grumbled that ladies would just influence the pace of the knife stroke. When she heard it, she was outraged at what she had said. Lin Dao recognized in the back of his mind that 10,000 years had passed since then, and Wang Xian'er's presence had perhaps grown stronger. Lin Dao wanted to hibernate and exercise until his wings were full before taking retribution. He married Ji Mingyu because the girl who deceived him would never have imagined that his pride would be utilized to cover up his marriage as the saint of the Divine Sword sect. He wondered how the Tianjian sect would react if they discovered that Lin Dao, whom they had chosen as their abandoned son, had married the holy maiden of the Divine Sword sect. Someone informed the sect master that this topic is extremely juvenile, and he cannot agree with it. The saint and his son were childhood sweethearts. They were meant to be a pair. He went on to question, how can an abandoned disciple of Tianjian sect be worthy of a saint? Lin Dao entered the room and informed the ignorant old man that it was a joke, since there was nothing in this world he was not deserving of. When her new wife heard this, she clenched her teeth in wrath, intending to oppose to what she said. The elderly guy spun back in rage and yelled, asking him what credentials he had. The protagonist stared at this ignorant idiot and used his powers to blast him away. His lips bled, and he crashed against the wall. People were shocked as they saw this. The sect master just sipped her tea. Ling Yueshuang exclaimed, I am the master of this divine sword sect. She firmly informed the elders that she had summoned everyone here today, not for discussion, but for notification. With a tremendous aura about her and a pleasant grin on her face, she reminded everyone that if there's nothing more, they may go. Ling Yueshuang successfully persuaded her elders to allow Lin Dao's marriage, and the dumb old man was eventually persuaded. He bowed and said farewell. While they were going away, the foolish youngster who had been upset before yelled out to his father, who turned back and asked his son what had occurred. The elderly guy grabbed his heart in sorrow, imploring his son to be cautious. He did not anticipate Lin Dao to be so strong and vicious. If he disagrees with him, he will severely injure him. Fair yelled in wrath, exclaiming that Ji Mingyu should not marry the vile robber Lin Dao. His father sneered, telling him that Lin Dao is no more bold than the average guy. He told his kid that Ji Mingyu would be his after all. After all, our Zhou family owns the Divine Sword sect. The protagonist understands that fighters in the universe are classified into 9 realms: acquired, inherent, Xianen, Ningxin Piyuan, celestial phenomena, Xianxin, immortality, and emperor of heaven. Ordinary warriors must first undergo physical training, which is separated into 3 stages. Chi, blood, muscles, and bones all work together to create amazing oneness. Only by completing the unification of blood and bones and attaining the vast perfection of the day after tomorrow will we be able to sense the aura of heaven and earth and enter the divine world. He bears the sword's heart, which has transcended the bounds of the planet. The sword is the Tao, and its heart is my own heavenly heart. He has the ability to consistently enhance all of the power that comes from the path of heaven. He is heavenly. He is the Tao. This Yantian world is split into 9 realms from bottom to top, with levels ranging from 9th to 1st. His current domain is the 7th level of Xiantian. But he understands that when it comes to martial strength, no one below the 2nd level of Xiantian is his opponent. And since the master of Tianjian sect, Su Jianxing, is just a 4th grade Xiantian, he has taken over this body. The hate for the original body is his hatred. Decided to kill Tianjinmen, get ready to die, he said with resolve. People insulted the protagonist, calling him a freeloader. Lin Dao didn't care about these idiots, but he did wonder why there were so many of them wherever he went. In the back of his mind, he realizes the sword's heart is a mentally retarded halo. The protagonist stood in front of the Divine Sword Sect treasure house. He simply happened to go see the magical sword. However, there were individuals in front of the gate who looked suspicious. Lin Dao pondered what riches this location had. The Ipach man arrogantly informed him that only court disciples are permitted to access here. Dogs and visiting sons-in-law are not permitted to enter, he joked. The other man wearing spectacles remarked with a smile that son-in-laws are not allowed here. Get out! The protagonist had had enough of these morons, and he unleashed his enormous strength, leaving everyone stunned. This person, whom we met before, clapped his hands. He had not expected Lin Dao to behave so carelessly in front of his precious home, the undesired dog of Tianjin sect. He informed him that they were fierce foes, and he hasn't even sought retribution for injuring his father. Lin Dao had no idea who this idiot was, so he questioned him. He answered menacingly, "You took what I loved, and injured my father." His eyes darkened, and a dark crimson glow enveloped his body. The protagonist immediately noticed what weapon this boy was wielding, and with remarkable speed, he struck the protagonist with his sword, as he was going to cut off the main character's head and shouting that he compelled him to do it. He used the technique known as Sword Ghost Secret Skills. The protagonist was astonished how the guy's technique slashed his cheek. The man chuckled as he quickly cut Lin Dao with the Black Moon 19th technique. The person with the Apache was stunned, thinking that everything was finished, and even more startled that senior brother Zhou Mubai was so homicidal. The man with spectacles yelled for others to run and warned the elders that someone was about to die. The man yelled angrily that he would cut him in pieces. The main character began to bleed profusely, and Lin Dao grinned and mocked him, telling him that with that toy in his hand, he would be unable to cut him. The foolish side character chuckled and inquired if he had lost consciousness owing to massive blood loss. Lin Dao's garments were shredded from the sword cuts, and with a sneer on his face, he said to this person, "A mere injury to the flesh is not worth mentioning." He smiled gently as he told the child he may not comprehend, but a swordsman's physique may be more powerful than a sword. The boy stopped assaulting and questioned if humans were indeed stronger than swords. He informed him that he was foolish. This ghost-howling knife is a Zhou family heritage. Yellow represents middle grade. Right after he said that, the blade broke into bits, and he was stunned, wondering what type of magic he used. Lin Dao appeared in front of him with even greater speed than this stupid side character, his eyes glowing red and glaring at him menacingly, and he spoke angrily that it is unusual for him to change into Armani from the world of cultivation, but he cut them into pieces after only 2 days of wearing it. The protagonist was not outraged because this boy was attempting to murder him. Rather, he was angry that he had ripped his clothing. With one punch, the child was blasted away and smashed into the floor, leaving his fellow buddies startled. Lin Dao informed him that his fine garments cost 2,580,000 yuan, and he would collect that money from him. The teenager was furious that this jerk was taking all of his money and then going away like that. He yelled loudly, promising to fight him to the death. He tried to attack the protagonist, but his buddies stopped him. Lin Dao entered a store with a peculiar bottle in his hands, and he was astonished by the number of items there. He examined the container thoroughly and concluded that it is unfortunate that all of the items are damaged. He decided to walk up to the second floor and look. He was equally displeased with what he found on the second level. Someone walked up behind him, and he yelled at him, telling him he couldn't take the items on the second level. The protagonist was irritated when he asked this individual if he thought he could take these poor things seriously. He then asked the man behind him if there was anything better. The elderly guy was offended that he didn't like his items and angered that he talked in such a loud voice. Lin Dao replied to the elderly man, saying that the greatest elixirs here are simply low-grade Huang-level tablets. So he need the greatest elixir of the highest degree. The main character was upset that this elderly guy thought these yellow-grade Huang-level elixirs were fantastic. He'd never seen a couple of the top Huang-level elixirs in his whole life. He questioned why the divine sword sex alchemy was so poor. He decided to forget about it and work on it himself. He instructed the elderly guy to prepare 1,000 Taiyang Cinco for him. He'll pick it up in 3 days. The elderly guy said, presumptuous, telling him that even the owner of the door would not point his fingers at him in this manner. He jumped as he was about to attack the protagonist from behind. The old man's onslaught was immediately halted by the protagonist's glance. Lin Dao pretended nothing had occurred and proceeded to suggest that if the elderly man understood, he should spend the time preparing Taiyang Cinco for him. The elderly guy was stunned. He wanted to know how this boy could be at the 9th level of Xiantian and beat him so effortlessly. Suddenly, a ninja emerged and informed senior brother Lin Dao that he had a message. When the protagonist glanced at the message, his eyes flared with wrath. In a burst of lightning, he vanished. At the Death Valley, this person who was targeting the main character recalled that Su Wuwang had ordered him, the Dead Man sect, to take action for a large payment for the girl who was yelling at brother Lin Dao not to come here. The other man was upset, so he grabbed the girl's head violently, and she yelled in agony. The man assured the girl that he didn't have to murder her brother if she requested him to. She may also attempt to serve him well. He offered to save her brother's life if she did this. The second person became upset and questioned the elderly ghost when they from the Dead Man sect had left anybody alive. The old ghost recalled this and decided to make a bet with her by informing her, as long as he can catch Lin Dao in 3 moves, she will be his. Suddenly, lightning flashed, and the wind picked up. It began pouring, and the protagonist landed on the ground. He moved ahead, and the elderly ghost taunted him, saying that because of the rain, God was having pity on him. Lin Dao clenched his teeth and said, "This rain is not falling for me," he yelled. "This is for you." As a rush of power erupted out of him, his eyes flashed with wrath. The old ghost snorted and released his sword, telling him he'd said too much. The old ghost moves at extraordinary speeds, yet the main character can see every move he makes. The old ghost struck him with his knife, but before the blade could strike the main character, he evaded it. Her sister yelled for her brother, warning him that they were going to murder him and he should go. "Please leave me here." The old ghost chuckled and asked Lin Dao whether he could see past his physical abilities. He spun around and launched another sword, spinning it quickly. His other buddy swore, and his friend had already made the second move. He then employed a technique and flung the spinning blade, which led directly to the main character. Lin Dao waited, ready for the attack, astonished by how basic the technique was. He then blocked both swords at the same moment, using his own power to return them to their owner. When the old ghost spotted swords coming straight towards him, he was shocked. And before the swords could kill him, he avoided his own swords. The other comrade was shocked that the old ghost's sword was returned to him. He wondered how this happened as he knew that the main character was weak. He felt the breeze shift near him, so he glanced over and discovered the girl was gone. The main character was far away from the enemy, holding his sister in his arms. The guy was astounded by how swiftly he materialized out of nowhere. Lin Dao apologized to his younger sister and told her not to remove her blindfold quite yet. His sister nervously reached out to him, still terrified. The protagonist simply said that there would be bloodshed because he was going to murder those idiots, and he discharged a killing intent focused toward the elderly ghost. The old ghost leaped at him, shouting, "That hell send him back to the west now!" And at that moment, he used another technique. The protagonist took a firm posture, ready to defeat the antagonist. Lin Dao's eyes were wide open and shone brilliantly, and an energy blade formed, blocking the old ghost's sword movement. The opponent was taken aback by how fierce the pressure was. After about a minute, his sword cracked, and the energy blade crushed his arm. He stood there, stunned. His other colleague was astonished as well, and he was concerned about the second uncle. As his companion saw the second uncle die, he lunged forward, intending to capture him. But with one look from the protagonist, the person froze in horror since he could sense a large amount of murderous intent, and he pondered who this guy was. He has never felt such murderous karma in my ancestors' body in his life. It is much harder for an adolescent monk to develop in this manner. He isn't human at all. Only a 1,000-year-old demon who was never born could explain it. The main figure stood in front of his opponent, his body enveloped in flames. He informed the individual that he didn't deserve to know who he was. He asked him how he wanted to die. The man was flabbergasted and didn't say. He bowed deeply and said that Su Wuong had paid him, the dead man sect, to attack him. "Please forgive me," he said. He also said that he knows where Su Wuong is. He yelled in horror, telling him that he could take him to Su Wuong and that he was eager to be his sword's slave. He was shivering with anxiety and begged him to save his life, even if it meant betraying the dead man sect. He returned to his senses and became bigger, yelling with determination that the group is not that simple to betray. The main character was astonished to learn that he was still a member of the nefarious group. Like a super scion, he exuded a great deal of power, and the protagonist leaped back. The guy had turned into something evil, like a twisted monster on the prowl. The guy roared, and his sister yelled for him to be cautious. The protagonist brushed his shoulder with a careless look, dissatisfied that he was the worst swordsman he had ever seen. The person slammed his sword to the ground, causing a big explosion, and Lin Dao's sister cried out for her brother, concerned. The guy looked more horrible than ever as he yelled at him to go to hell while using another technique, his sword sizzling with lightning. He yelled and swung his sword in wrath. He slashed quickly, and he swung his sword with all his might. However, the protagonist grabbed the sword effortlessly. He grumbled that if he cut him down again, he'd have to change clothes. A golden glow began to emerge from his body. Lin Dao dislikes black magic because he understands that it is wicked magic that destroys a person's intellect. The protagonist understood that, although he cultivates swords, he also wields them. He determined to show him his actual might. He grasped the blade fiercely, and it splintered. Lin Dao employs the same strategy as the last user, but he does it more effectively and with more refinement. The sword cut slashed both him and the adjacent mountains. The sword stroke was so strong, it cut through the mountain like paper. Lin Dao's sister muttered to her brother not to abandon her. The protagonist said nothing, but he was aware that in his former life, his relatives had perished in battles, and he had never received familial devotion. He was resolved not to let his loved ones suffer unjustly in this life. Someone suddenly called for the main character to halt. The individual yelled that the divine sword sex regulations prohibit outsiders from entering at any time. Lin Dao's sister was concerned, so she asked her brother whether this would give him any problems. The protagonist soothed her, saying everything will be alright. He then kept walking, and when the guard saw he was not stopping, he released his blade. The central character exhaled, a gigantic tornado arose, and the guards shouted as they were pulled by it. Lin Dao entered the sect, the cyclone stopped, and both guards collapsed. This person read the rumors that Lin Dao had broken the divine sword restrictions. The person was aware that strangers were not permitted to enter. This was confirmed by the sect head himself. He was relieved that not even the saint could protect him now. The man smirked and commanded one of the guards to go, ask Senior Brother Punishment Hall to address this situation. Lin Dao put her sister on the bed and told her she could rest peacefully in this room. He vowed that from now on, she would live with him. The protagonist's sister began to shut her eyes and fell asleep. Lin Dao exited the room, closing the door. When he got out of the room, there were numerous guards waiting to attack him. One of the guards yelled that he had broken the laws of the Divine Sword sect, brought strangers in without authorization, and even seriously harmed a fellow sect member. Senior Brother appeared, and one of the guards begged him to make a choice. While the guard was talking about him, Lin Dao reminded everyone that he was right here, and whether they can take him away or not is determined on their abilities. Senior Brother released a chain and informed the main character, Angloy, that he is arrogant and that he has endured him long enough. He yelled that he would arrest him as he quickly twisted his chain to assault the protagonist. Lin Dao's one eye became crimson in the blink of an eye. The man was struck by 2 assaults. Everyone was taken aback as he employed another blinking spell. The other person called for everyone to assault him. A guard yelled at Lin Dao, exclaiming, "If a guy battles with actual swords and firearms, what sort of man can he be if he simply utilizes ghost tricks?" he inquired angrily. Lin Dao simply said that his misdeeds were not worthy of death. The protagonist showed everyone his pinky finger, and warned them that if he just handed them one small finger, they would die. All of the men present were furious because he was looking down on them. The golden light began to build in his hand. His eyes sparkled, and all of that energy flowed to his pinky finger. His pinky finger discharged a tremendous energy. All of the individuals who were about to assault him were blasted away. He informed all the guards that he was returning to his home to recuperate. He said that if they disturbed him again, someone would be murdered. Other guards who had not battled the protagonist were terrified. When he returned inside his home, he discovered his sister was already awake and tearfully informed him that she would be leaving. Lin Dao calmed her sister and told her not to worry. He is currently the spouse of a saint, and they can't do anything to him. Her sister was astonished and questioned if what he stated was true. Lin Dao grinned and said, "Of course it's true." Lin Dao's sister reddened and struggled to say anything. The protagonist smiled warmly and asked her what was wrong. His sister shook her head angrily, insisting that everything was all right. In the Dead Man sect, someone told the sect master that the 2 ancient spirits had died. The sect leader grumbled about the Dead Man sect, which has always been the only one that murders people but is now slain by a waste. The person bowed and informed the master that the information shows that Lin Dao, who is in the obtained realm, is a waste subordinate. The sect master informed the disciple that he understood and asked him to look up. The man was already terrified, but he glanced up anyhow. The sect leader yelled for him to look into his eyes. The sect's master's eyes sparkled and emitted a flash of fire. The guy on his knees burned to death, as did others around. The sect head yelled that failing to perform things is a capital offense. The sect leader called out to Lao Wu. A dark red energy appeared, and when Lao Wu appeared, he immediately asked the master if there was anybody he should murder right now once this person was disclosed. The sect master got right to the point, informing the individual that a man called Lin Dao from the Shindao sect had assassinated 2 of my deacons. He directed the guy to take action and bring his head back for him. The guy informed the master that he had heard of this Lin Dao. He was first used as a scapegoat by Tianjian sect's youthful master Suwu. However, he accidentally became the Shindao family's son-in-law. The sect master informed this individual that he is very important to the Shindao sect and may have handed on the protector sword Qi. Do not be reckless. The guy expelled a black force and sneered, reminding the master that in this world of agony, he had never failed to murder anybody. The sect leader acknowledged that this location is filled with misery and lacks spiritual force. The sect master tapped his finger on his chair, concerned about something. He narrowed his eyes, attempting to remember anything. He seemed to have heard the name Lin Dao someplace, but he couldn't recall it just now. This moron said again, "Don't believe these damn liars from the dead man sect. They said that any assault would kill him, therefore he proposed a fixed lunch for 2 people, civic and military." The man was outraged. He believed they had tricked him, and he lost everything. "I pay single money to drink wine." He was enraged and said that in the end, he didn't know how many tiers of assassins he dispatched, but they couldn't even kill a piece of garbage. Another strange figure smiled, advising the young master to be patient since the dead man sect has planned for stronger masters. The person who was still enraged hoped that these assassins would not fail again. He calmed down a bit, but he was irritated that he didn't have any money and would have to return to his former work. He told the strange gentleman to go and bring in the freshly married wife. The person bowed and proceeded to carry out his instructions. The man brought the bound lady. He was surprised when he saw the tied-up lady. The second person informed his master that he was going immediately. The girl sobbed, wondering who this person was, and exclaimed that her fiancé is a Tianjian sect follower. The young master laughed uncontrollably and asked her what her fiancé's name was. She responded that her fiancé's name is Lin Dao. The man froze in disbelief, confused. He was surprised to learn that her fiancé's name is Lin Dao, so he inquired again to confirm. She verified to him that they were wedded from the tip of their little finger, and recommended him to let her go as soon as possible. Otherwise, Tianjianmen would not let him go. Su Wuong was enraged, but he eventually calmed down and began to think of something. He cut the cords that were around her. Su Wuong concluded that the female Lin Dao married was a sibling, and there must have been a huge mistake. The person began his plan and lied to Lin Dao's fiancé, claiming that Lin Dao had betrayed the Tianjin sect. Not only that, but we can't contact him right now. He's already the husband of the Divine Blade sect's holy maiden. The girl yelled that he was lying, claiming that Lin Dao was not that kind of guy. The individual insisted that what he said was true. If she doesn't believe it, he'll personally accompany her to the Divine Sword Gate tomorrow to face Lin Dao. Lin Dao's fiancé burst into tears and agreed to visit the protagonist the next day. The man turned around with a sinister grin and an ugly face that looked worse than the devil. In the back of his mind, he didn't believe the protagonist was an honest person, but he didn't anticipate him and the protagonist to be sex-loving thieves. He continues to believe that when Lin Dao's fiancé visits the Shindao Gate tomorrow, he will be chastised by hundreds of people. He predicted that with Ji Mingyue's fiery temper, she might just castrate him on the spot. He laughed uncontrollably in his head. The next day, the protagonist awoke, stretched, and wondered where Linny had gone so early in the morning. Lin Dao's sister was cooking, and she sampled the meal. When the main character entered the kitchen and saw his sister cooking, he questioned Yi. Why is she making breakfast? After eating the soup, she glanced at her brother and inquired about where their maids came from. Lin Dao sighed, realizing that he had been negligent. But he has no alternative but to go to Ji Mingyu and beg for staff. When the gate was opened, someone screamed his name in an aggressive tone. This individual asks him whether he understands his sin. The main character was upset that this individual had come to block the door so early in the morning. The protagonist warned the person not to obstruct the traffic. He has something to do with Ji Mingyu and Nanizi. The disciples chuckled, finding it unusual that he really addressed the saint in this manner. They questioned why his tone was so strange, as if he was talking about his own daughter. The disciples chuckled, finding it unusual that he really addressed the saint in this manner. They questioned why his tone was so strange, as if he was talking about his own daughter. The guy wearing the mask yelled that he was arrogant, injuring his followers in the punishment hall and harassing other disciples in the alchemy hall. He went on to say that he also violated the divine sword sect's laws by bringing in strangers without permission. His eyes blazed crimson, and a dark red aura emanated from his body, as he roared that he would punish him right now. Lin Dao grinned, secretly hoping to conceal his identity and live a quiet life. He pondered why flies usually bothered him. The main character was going to bash the man. But just then, a servant arrived and shouted out to Lin Dao. She bowed and introduced herself, explaining that she was the saint's personal maid. From now on, she will also serve him. She wondered why Elder Zhou Yan was present. But she opted to overlook him, claiming that his business was unimportant. When the person heard that, he clenched his teeth in fury, and the servant went on to add that the young master, the saint, and the sect master were waiting for him in the meeting hall. The protagonist replied that he was also seeking for her, so please lead the way. The man in the mask was upset, but he didn't say anything as he let them leave. And they walked away. However, he intended to correctly criticize Lin Dao in front of the sect master. The sect leader was furious with these irresponsible brats. All of the guards who had been thrashed by the main character bent humbly before the sect leader, begging her to make the choice for them. The servant joyfully proclaimed that she had brought the main character. The masked man entered the auditorium, saying that she needed to make a choice for their punishment hall. The elderly man said, "My alchemy hall also has something to say." The sect leader murmured to Lin Dao that this person had positive feelings about him. The protagonist just laughed. Both the elderly guy and the disguised man were furious, questioning why he was laughing. The protagonist smiled and said, "I was laughing at them because they had been practicing for hundreds of years and were among the elders, but they were still as ignorant as a young boy. They both released their strength because they were furious. And they asked the junior whether he wanted to die." The sect leader cleared her throat and informed everyone that she had invited everyone here today to make an announcement. Elder Zhou Yan and Elder Mu Fei will speak about the minor details you stated later. She wanted to continue with what she was going to say when the servant entered the hall. He bowed and informed to her, speaking quickly, that a lady had arrived beyond the mountain gate. The sect leader cried, instructing the guard to speak gently. The servant was sweating profusely and spoke slowly, stating that the lady claimed to be Lin Dao's fiancée. Lin Dao clenched his teeth as others ridiculed him, labeling him a slime since they had no idea he was this kind of guy. But he was more surprised that he had a fiancée. Outside the Divine Sword Gate, Su Wuwang comforted Lin Dao's fiancé, and they began to ascend the stairs, with this person promising her that if Lin Dao emerged, he would meet him face to face on her behalf. Both Su Wuwang and Lin Dao's fiancé stopped walking as the protagonists and others arrived. The protagonist recognized it was the obnoxious man again. Su Wuwang just smirked confidently as he believed his preparations were going wonderfully. The Divine Sword Sect Master recognized the young master of the Tianjian sect. The main character and the irritating man exchanged glares. Su Wuwang presented the girl, informing everyone, even the protagonist. Dugu Rong is Lin Dao's fiancé. With a cruel smirk, he informed the protagonist that Miss Sect Master Ling has always drawn a clear line between good and evil. If he has any complaints, just say it's okay. Dugu Rong stared at the man, knowing she hadn't said anything like that. The main character glanced at this female with astonishment, sensing something in her. Lin Dao felt that this girl was born with a sword heart. He was astounded, just like in his past life. He went all across the globe and never encountered someone with a natural talent for swordsmanship. He pondered whether the planet had altered during the last 10,000 years. The masked person and the elderly man grinned, knowing the main figure was in danger now. Dugu Rong bowed and informed Lin Dao that even if he did not want to marry her, We should also cancel the engagement first. She wanted to continue speaking, but the sect leader stopped her, and she inquired whether she had any evidence. Dugu Ron pulled out a scroll and handed it to her, and the sect head began reading the letter. In Xiaoling Zhongtang, thanks to the great kindness of Mr. Dugu, there is no way to repay. As for the present plan, I can only wait till the dog grows up and joins his bride Dugu's household, where he will live as a cow or horse. To reciprocate the amazing generosity. Lin Zhongtang, the sect head, struggled not to chuckle, but the main character was just stunned after reading the letter. With a melancholy tone in her voice, she went on to tell that her father was friendly to the Lin family back then, and they had this marriage contract. The elderly man was enraged, and yelled what a dishonest son-in-law. He went on to say that, despite the fact that he is already engaged, he still wants to marry the saint. Do you believe you can do anything you want with my heavenly sword? The masked person took a posture, promising Miss Dugu that such wicked conduct will be severely punished in our punishment hall. The other disciples drew their swords and prepared to assault when the masked man commanded everyone to fetch Lin Dao for him. Ling Yueshuang was furious, and she informed Elder Zhou that it was not his time to issue commands in this divine sword sect. The masked guy and the elderly man kept their tongues quiet, but inwardly, they were enraged. The person politely informed the sect master that as the master of the Xindao sect punishment hall, he is inherently responsible for criminal legislation. He said, with a hint of wrath in his tone, that if she is determined to defend this individual and make our divine sword sect the laughing stock of the world, he has nothing further to say. Ling Yueshuang became enraged when he realized that the masked person and the elderly guy intended to murder Lin Dao. The major players spoke the truth, claiming that he was unaware of this, but that he had examined the marriage certificate and found it to be completely accurate. The protagonist inquired about his second wife's opinion on the matter. The saint was not enraged. She responded calmly that since he didn't know, it wasn't his responsibility. Therefore, let's just let this go. Miss Dugu will remain at her Xindao gate for the time being. She noted that this is also a family concern. Everyone was stunned, including Su Wuwang, who basically froze since he didn't anticipate this at all. They all questioned why she was not furious at all. Ji Mingyu crossed her arms and informed Su Wuwang that this was a family problem inside her Xindao sect. He may depart. Su Wuwang couldn't believe it, and asked Ji Mingyu what type of pleasure this man gave her. You truly pamper him like this. He became agitated and exclaimed that he was not persuaded, claiming that in terms of life experience, he is the young master of the Tianjian sect and a suitable match for her, Ji Mingyu. In terms of cultivation, he has learned Dzogchen. His face distorted into an even more horrifying grimace than before. And he said that the protagonist is a waste, a piece of garbage. He questioned, why can't she get this into her head? Ji Mingyu frowned at Su Wuwang, ordering him to mind his remarks. She ordered him dismissively, get out of here. Lin Dao smiled as he realized she was genuinely defending him in this way. He knew Ling Yueshuan had already told her his situation to her. The protagonist requested his wife to wait since he had not consented to let him depart yet. He then approached Su Wuwang, who was enraged, and inquired whether the protagonist intended to continue insulting him. With a furious tone, the main character stated that he has always been rational and would not bully the weak or hold grudges against people without justification. Even if he and others continue to conspire against him, he will always laugh it off and will not be easily killed. He yelled, wondering why he wanted to harm his family. Su Wuwang was so terrified that he farted and yelled, asking him if he really felt he was that slanderous. Grudges in the realm of cultivation never injured the family, and Su Wuwang wanted to proclaim that he, too, is family. The protagonist told him to shut up. His eyes sparkled as he discharged a significant quantity of murderous intent. He inquired whether he wanted to die. The masked man and the elderly man screamed, perplexed as to how the young master of the Tianjian sect could be slain so quickly. The Elderly guy was furious, and he yelled at the sect master. Ji Mingyu has hired such an idiot as her spouse. This is a terrible embarrassment for our divine sword sect. Lin Yueshuang yawned and smiled, informing the elderly man that if Lin Dao wished to murder, he could just kill him. The elderly guy was surprised. He cursed and screamed in his mind. This dumb overweight lady is so enamored with Lin Dao's attractive features. He wondered whether Lin Dao was the one she had reared. Su Wuwang laughed uncontrollably and inquired whether he truly intended to murder him. His expression became that of a monster, and he continued to laugh, informing the protagonist that he could see that he was just embarrassing him and his Tianjian sect. A black aura emerged around his body, and he sneered, stating he only believes he is the youthful master of the Tianjian sect, but he has also been the #1 fighter for the previous 300 years. Even the Qingyun sect recognized him as a close disciple. He released his sword as lightning crackled in it. He roared at Lin Dao to draw his sword. Putting the swordsman's honor on the line, they will battle till death. The protagonist informed Su Wuwang that he didn't need a weapon. He is not worthy of drawing his weapon. Su Wuwang laughed as he became enraged when the main character informed him he was unworthy. He swung his sword and yelled at the protagonist to go to hell, then instructed him to ask the king of hell whether he was worthy of letting him die. He smiled like a monster, his sword crackling with lightning. Dugu Rong sensed something from the protagonist. Su Wuwang rushed toward the main character, ready to murder him. Lin Dao intended to use his pinky finger again as he could sense the tremendous power emanating from the sword. He used his pinky to counter Su Wuwang's move. Lin Dao's pinky finger collided with Su Wuwang's sword as he yelled at him to go to hell. Su Wuwang's blade splintered, and he was astonished to see it. The masked guy and the elderly man were stunned, and they pondered. Is this coercion the holy sword of the divine sword sect, Leng Yueshuang, giving all of the holy sword chi to Lin Dao? No surprise he was so confident, they reasoned. The masked man yelled at the protagonist, asking him to stop because he is a student of Qin Yun and I, the divine sword sect, cannot afford to insult him at any cost. Su Wuwang wailed in anguish and warned the protagonist that he could not murder him. He has already called senior brother Qingyun sect, and senior brother will soon arrive to make a choice for him. The elderly guy glanced at the sect leader and exclaimed that something significant had occurred this time. Everyone understands that Qingyun sect is the most defensive of flaws. Lin Yueshuang responded calmly, saying he didn't need to seek his counsel on everything. She feels he has the potential to manage other sect connections successfully. Lao Zhou was simmering with wrath, yet in the back of his mind, he realized he was a sinecure in command of the Elixir Treasure House. Lin Dao then murdered Su Wuwang with overwhelming force. Lao Zhou was enraged with the protagonist, calling him an idiot. Lin Dao fought with the elderly man, informing him that Su Wuwang had raped and murdered a female disciple of the Shindao sect in the front, and used him as a scapegoat in the rear. As elders, he did not pursue justice for the disciples. However, since the other party's supporter is timid and lacks responsibility, he inquired as to the purpose of his Shindao sect in maintaining him. Everyone's mouth fell in disbelief, and they were dumbfounded. Lao Zhou yelled and cursed the main character. He yelled that he had caused significant disruption to their Shindao sect. He threatened to murder him in retaliation for what he had done. However, Leng Yueshuang leaped and intercepted Lao Zhou's assault. Lao Zhou began to dispute with the sect master, claiming that they could never afford to anger Qingyun's sect. He advised that he murder this tiny robber and return his corpse to make atonement. Perhaps she can safeguard the divine sword sect. Leng Yueshuang stared at the elderly man, insisting that she knew what to do. She informed him firmly that it was not his turn to make the choice in Shindao sect. Lin Dao was drowsy, and he urged the elderly man not to mention Qingjianmen because it made him sleepy. Lao Zhou was now losing his wits. He called the sect master dumb and questioned if she was so possessive of this attractive youngster that she hesitated to destroy his divine sword sect. He released his sword, yelling that he isn't persuaded. He cried angrily. As the sect's leader, you have repeatedly protected your face and head, and you have even secretly passed on the holy swords of the Divine Sword Sect to him. It was in the hands of a female like her that the Divine Sword Sect fell. The elderly man withdrew his sword, and his hair began to grow. He absolutely lost his head, shouting that he had enough of this selfish bitch, and that he was going to clean the home today. Lin Dao noted that his Mediterranean was growing hair, and he recognized that this elderly guy had worked so hard to conceal his power to the extent of ugliness. Ling Yueshuang was angry, veins bulging in her face, and she informed him she would give him one final opportunity. Kneel and confess. Lao Zhou refused to do it, claiming that he is not frightened of her, because the elderly man would not. Listen, Ling Yueshuang's eyes sparkled and dark crimson rifts began to open next to her, and swords sprung from them. She pointed her hand forward and utilized the Chimin sword-killing formation technique. Lao Zhou snorted and repelled the onslaught. Ling Yueshuang utilized a different approach when additional blades sprouted. The elderly guy swung his sword quickly. This is merely the 1000th cut, and it means nothing to him. He chuckled and said that there was nothing she could do as he dodged and struck Ling Yueshuang. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button. Thanks for watching.